Security Salesman by Unknown Like and Sub PLS. When I was 19, I was a Marine and had stupidly used my military perks to get a home loan and bought my first house. I moved a barracks room worth of stuff into this place that seemed to me like a palace. Of course I went out and bought some bar stools, a futon to sleep on until I got a bed, and some used coffee tables for my TV. I also had my dog with me. I was unpacking my meager belongings in the living room, noticed a car had pulled into my drive and blocked me in. I walked out and there stood a man offering to sell me a home security system. The man was dressed in khakis and a polo with a name tag that I can't recall, and the car didn't have a logo on it. It should have been a red flag for me, but I figured that some people on the job didn't drive company vehicles. He gave me his card. I don't even remember the company he told me he was with, to be honest. Cue the friendly salesman, giving me his pitch about needing a system and all of the perks that would come with being able to watch the exterior of my house at any time. As a low-ranking military member, I knew I couldn't afford yet another thing, so my mind was working to try to get this man to go away. I even considered ninja chopping him or whatever it is that we Marines do in hand-to-hand, just to get him to leave. But I'm a sort of passive person. I'm too nice? Nah, let's call it polite. I won't be rude to someone doing their job. I've been in customer service. I can relate. I tried politely declining his offer after he had tried to show me some stuff on his iPad, but you know how persistent these types can be. I'll admit to my own stupidity when answering his questions, like giving out too much information. Do you live alone? No, I live here with my wife and our 3 large dogs. At least I added in the large part. Her and her dogs hadn't actually moved in yet, and hers were just fat, though they were more viscous than my own good boy. But 2 women living together probably seemed like easier targets. I also mentioned being a Marines when he asked. He had seemed a bit shocked but wouldn't be deterred. What kind of security system do you have? My dogs and me. Not the best answer I could have given. I wasn't exactly intimidating. I mean, I would be terrifying if I had a gun or something. I've been using them all my life, and I've never missed a target, alive or inanimate. If you would invite me in, I can show you the best places to set up cameras, he mentioned more than a few times. Each time made me more and more creeped out, thinking that he was wanting to potentially rob me, not that there was much to take. Despite being a sexual assault victim, all I could consider was a possible burglary, and made sure we stayed away from my house while we talked. We were outside for about 15 minutes total, me spending most of that time trying to politely get away from him and retreat inside. I wound up at my wit's end with social niceties and just walked away, leaving him standing alone in my front yard. I walked into my house and locked the door. He got into his car and left. I thought nothing more of it. After some unpacking, I couldn't do much. I had nowhere to put most of it. I ate some junk food and put together the futon. I got it all decked out with my fluffiest blankets, made sure the doors and windows were locked, and went to lay down in the living room. Looking back, I'm not sure why I didn't put it in a bedroom. They all have blinds and the rooms take a bit of getting to. Perhaps I wanted to be near an exit. For some context, my back door is a double glass paned door. At the time, I didn't have curtains on it, but I did have blinds on the kitchen window. My kitchen, living room, and dining room are all connected, but there's a wall in the living room that I strategically situated my futon against so it couldn't be seen by the back doors, or the front door window. Call me paranoid. I had been laying down for a few hours and at about 11, my dog got off the futon and went to the back doors. My dog is large, and looks like a Rottweiler in coloring. He's a coonhound mix, but I guess city people don't have hunting dogs, but he's never heard anything in his life. He'll greet strangers at the door with a tail wag and hardly barks. He stood back there for a bit and whined a few times. I ignored him. It was probably a squirrel. But then he started growling, a sound that I'll never forget. It sent terror straight through me as I sat alone in the dark. I had only ever felt that fear once, when a mountain lion screamed and I realized I was powerless against nature. But that's a story for a different thread. The point is, these sounds are designed to scare you. And it petrified me. I was frozen and wanted to wimp out, to hide, to call the cops, but I realized if someone was out there, they'd for sure see my phone light and know where I was. So while my dog stayed stationed at the back door, I talked myself up just enough to move off the couch and investigate, still scared out of my mind. I slunk to the kitchen and grabbed a kitchen knife, one of the only utensils I had. Thanks, Ma, and crept to the kitchen window. I was squatting amongst the cabinets so that I couldn't be seen from any windows, bouncing a little, trying to gear up to peel back the blinds. My brain was telling me irrational things, horror stories that I had read come to life. To be real, I was ready to bitch out. I'm not a brave person. I was in communications for shit's sake. Pretty far from any life-threatening situation. Well, not one that involves people at my fucking house. In my one safe fucking space. My hideout, my protection from anything outside wanting in. I've always been afraid of home invasion. It stems from an incident when I was younger that isn't really worth mentioning further. Point is, if someone dares enter my safe place, it's not safe anymore. I thought I couldn't get more scared in that moment. But then I saw a male figure in my backyard and my heart jumped. He wasn't very far from the window I was looking out of. He was bold enough to not wear anything over his head, and I saw the blonde hair in the moonlight. It only took me a few seconds to recognize the security salesman in the dark. He was on the edge of my porch, watching my back door, watching my dog. I jumped up quickly, climbed over the bar counter, and turned on the lights as I went towards the back door to let my still growling dog out in hopes that he'd at least get rid of the man, if not injure him. No dice. As soon as the lights came on, he had just enough time to go jump the low part of the fence to safety before my dog even got off the porch. I didn't sleep that night. My dog sat on the futon with me, calm as could be, having done his job. The next morning, I filed a police report, but I couldn't tell them his name or what company he was with, having lost the card he gave me. They sent some patrols through the area and I found out that all legit salesmen should have an ID upon request. That night, I had 2 friends stay with me, ready for him to come back to either A, try to rob me or commit more nefarious acts, or B, try to scare me into home security. He didn't come back. And I haven't seen him since. My dog hasn't growled like that since either. But I'm terrified for the next time I hear it. My camp friend tried to kill me by our area. So when I was 13, my parents sent me to an all-girls fitness camp to work on becoming the best version of me. Well, let's be honest here, it was a fat camp. And it was as horrible as you can imagine. Bad food, all-day exercise, and god-awful counselors. The camp took place on a college campus, where they had us sleeping in dorms of 2 girls per room. But I had high hopes that it wouldn't be a complete waste of a summer, as my roommate seemed like a great girl. Let's call her Mary. We had similar interests and the same style. It seemed like a perfect match. We would chat late into the night planning our escape from the camp, bemoaning having to give up our cell phones, though secretly I had managed to sneak mine in, and talking about our families and how much they sucked for sending us here. To be honest, I was surprised that she was even at this camp. She was actually pretty fit, and her parents had signed her up for the whole summer versus mine only sending me for 2 weeks. Only 2 days into being at this place, I was pulled aside by another girl who I had become close friends with. She warned me that Mary had a lot of issues and the reason why she had been sleeping in a single for X amount of time was because no one else wanted to room with her. Well, I brushed it off, thinking it was just rumors and other girls being mean. That day at lunch, Mary seemed rather mad at me and for the life of me I couldn't figure out why. So when I got a chance I asked her what was up. She ranted at me about how everyone was so mean and was I going to leave too? She went on to explain how this one girl she was rooming with switched rooms because she made friends with this popular girl and that she made up lies to be popular. And, silly me, I believed her. We continued hanging out and only now do I realize how she was keeping me from hanging out with anyone else. Near the end of my first week, the camp took us on a long walk over to the local pool. It was a big deal as it was super hot and only a once-a-week activity. Mary and I were super excited to go. When we got there we quickly claimed some chairs and left our stuff there. As Mary had been at the camp for several months she didn't have to pass some stupid can you swim test, that I assume is mandatory in most camp settings. So we were separated for about 20 minutes. After I passed with flying colors, thank you swim team, I jumped into the pool and just started floating around. I heard her calling my name, and saw her waving me over to the deep end of the pool. I swam over and asked her what was up, and she said she wanted to show me something. Next thing I know, her hands are around my neck and she is shoving me underwater. Now, I am a good swimmer and I am very capable of holding my breath for quite a long time. But never in my life had anything like this happened to me, and I panicked and opened my mouth to scream. Luckily, before my mind had even processed what was happening, I had kicked up my legs and shoved her back and made a desperate escape. Somehow I managed to swim away and pull myself out of the pool. As I caught my breath and began to process what had just happened, I looked back at her. She was just staring at me, not having moved. I quickly grabbed my stuff and ran into the bathroom and called my mom. I was in tears as I explained what happened, and it was very obvious she didn't believe me. I stayed in that bathroom until we left to go back to the camp. I didn't leave the counselor's sides the entire walk back. When we arrived back at the camp, I was pulled aside by one of the women in charge. She very rudely demanded I give her my cell phone. I of course denied having one, and asked why she thought I did. She told me that my parents had called about some assault that had happened to me and they told them I had called. Quickly I excused it, saying I borrowed a phone from a lady at the pool. Thankfully they bought that. They told me that I would be moved to a new room the next day, and that I had to spend the night with Mary one last time. Furiously I begged them to please let me sleep on the floor of another girl's room, but they insisted I was being melodramatic. As soon as I was left alone, again I raced to the closest bathroom and called my mom. That's when I learned the truth about Mary. I wasn't her second roommate, nor her third, fourth or fifth. I was the sixth girl to stay in a room with her. 3 of her roommates had left camp early, and the other 2 had switched rooms at the first opportunity. All 5 other girls had made allegations of violence from Mary against them, but the camp refused to do anything, and insisted she was just a troubled girl who wanted to make friends. Or as they told my parents, well, she has had some issues in the past. That night I didn't sleep at all, and neither did Mary. She sat up in bed staring at me all damn night. I could feel her watching me and I was terrified. I had my phone clutched in my hand with 911 dialed and ready to call at any moment. I practically cried when the sun came up. That day I was moved to a new room, in a different building, and somehow managed to break my foot in the process, so my parents drove up and took me home with a cast on my foot to commemorate my time there. To this day I have had issues from what this girl did to me, and I have never been able to live with roommates or make friends as easily. So Mary, wherever you are out there, let's never meet again. Wow, almost 13 minutes in. She was wielding a butcher's knife in a Jack-in-the-Box by Macy Blur. I am on my phone, so excuse any mistakes, keyboard warriors. I swear this story is real, you cannot make this shit up. When I was around 11 years old, 2014, my family and I had just moved from Tennessee to Texas as my dad was working out a deal for a new job. My brother and I were homeschooled at this time, which meant we could move in with my aunt and uncle with no problems relating to finding a house in a good school district. But that is besides the point. My family was pretty close back then, and all of the cousins got along just fine. We loved to do everything together, especially me and my cousin Peyton. My immediate family, meaning me, mom, dad, brother and sister, had spent the past 7 years without a Jack-in-the-Box. It was terrible. We were all born in Texas, so we loved it. But living in Tennessee we had to go without it. A particular night, however, all of our parents had gone out to dinner and told us very specifically to not leave the house. We were to lock the doors after they left and play games or something. You might be thinking this is now becoming about an intruder, but I promise you this is 10 times more bizarre. After the parents left, all of the cousins got together and we decided that we wanted ice cream and candy. Not that it is important, but I remember Ben and Jerry's being the main target. So we devised a foolproof plan to sneak out and acquire the goods. Well, we thought it was foolproof. My older sister, driver, my cousin Peyton and I all loaded into my dad's car that was left at the house, and off we were to get the food. We should not have even left. On our way to the store to get the snacks, we decided that Jack-in-the-Box sounded much better than some sugar. So off we went. The drive was full of Bruno Mars and Meghan Trainor. How perfect does that sound for 2014? As we pulled up to the drive-thru, we decided that it was about 3 cars too long, and that we would just go inside and order instead. Wrong choice. When we stepped inside, there was one girl in the restaurant. She was short with a small figure and wearing winter clothes, so she looked completely ready for an outing. The girl asked the cashier for a water cup, and proceeded to fill it with either Sprite or some other soda. I remember the guy at the register looking at her extremely confused. but it was late at night and he could not care less, I'm sure. When she finished filling up her cup, she drank it extremely quickly and started to turn around to throw the cup out and leave. I have an awful memory, but I do remember her eyes being wide open as if she had seen something scarring at this point. We had been standing at the entrance doors for the entire interaction just watching, for whatever reason. We were just very nosy. But as she is walking out, I looked down and noticed that she was gripping a large butcher's knife, you guys. This thing was huge. Immediately my heart dropped and I heard my cousin go, "Oh my god, no way, no way, no way," or something like that. So the knife-wielding girl leaves the restaurant and we go on to order our food, talking about it to the guy at the register and kind of laughing it off, but also still very curious and confused. As we leave with our food, we see the girl crossing the street to the CVS. Now, it was kinda late, but there were still a good number of cars driving on this road at the time. She did not look either way, just crossed with ease as if invincible. We brushed it off and assumed she was just doing her own thing, but after a while of eating some tacos and talking about how fun it was to be out without permission, we saw maybe a dozen police lights start to enter the CVS parking lot. Like I said before, we were nosy. So we decided to do what any nosy person does. Investigate. We drove over to the CVS and we were stopped in the parking lot by an officer to be asked a couple of questions. My memory gets a bit hazy here, but I remember it was a problem because my cousin and I were both minors at the time, or something about being minors and involving ourselves with the police was a problem. They asked us a couple questions and I just remember my sister and cousin explaining that we had seen a girl wielding a knife in the Jack-in-the-Box across the street. So with that, they let us go and we hurried back home. A little bit later that night, when everyone, parents included, was winding down for bed, our mothers called the three of us into one of the rooms in the house to talk about something. I don't think any of us realized that they knew what they did. They sat us down and calmly asked us what we did tonight, and I think we lied, but I don't quite remember either way. It was useless, because they knew everything, even what we did not know. Our moms told us that someone on Facebook had posted about 3 heroic girls that knew information about the girl in the situation that I am about to explain to you. Heroic? Hardly. All we did was answer a few questions. Nosy? That's more like it. They told us that the girl had entered the CVS and grabbed a woman by the hair, and proceeded to hold the knife to her throat for several minutes before the police could show up. Apparently people had tried to get her off, but it was useless after all. She had the weapon. The girl was also apparently screaming and just being very violent, but as that was so many years ago, I can't remember much detail. I know that that's not an end of the world, nail-biter story, but how bizarre is that? To this day, I think about how easily it could have been one of us with a knife to the throat in a Fort Worth Jack-in-the-Box. Or how easily someone could have been killed. But also, if it wasn't for the girl, we would have gotten through that night with our foolproof plan. So hey, Jack-in-the-Box knife girl, let's not meet again. Also, we never got candy or ice cream, only PTSD. My cousin and I now laugh about this all the time, and refer to it as our witness protection program moment.